From time to time, we get a call to shoot a more businessy looking portrait of a husband and wife sales team for use in their promotional materials and website. A typical studio portrait setup is too smooth and quiet for this type of client. They want something a little more upbeat and exciting. For this portrait, we've decided we're going to use a medium format digital capture system to give us a little more depth of field control and a higher level of detail. First, let's start off with a 42 by 32 inch softbox for our main light. A softbox of this size will give us very smooth and predictable light that we can easily feather off to solve exposure problems that we're going to encounter in this type of setup. Here's what I mean. When we have our softbox placed in the vertical position, like we're just going to be lighting one person, we'll find out that when we put two people in, the person that's furthest from the light, let's call that position 1, can be exposed properly from that main light, but the person closest to the light, let's call that position 2, will be greatly overexposed because they're so much closer to the light source. We can fix that. But first, let's take a look at the problem in depth. Now, with our main light pointed right at the subject here in position 1, we can set its power level to give us an exposure value of f11.0 without any trouble. But watch what happens when we move into position 2. We can measure that same light source, and it's now f11.5. That's a half a stop difference. Here is an example image of how not to set your main light for a two-person portrait. And here's how we're going to fix that. First, rotate your softbox to its horizontal position. Then swing or feather the softbox away from your subject. This technique works best with softboxes that have a recessed panel and a deep lip here like the Shimera Super Pro Pluses. Now, go ahead and re-measure both position 1 and position 2. We find now that position 1 is f8 1/10 and position 2 is also f8 1/10. We want to work at an aperture setting of f11.0, so all we need to do now is go back to the flash pack, increase the power to get right at f11.0, and we've got a great looking main light. Take a look at this example image. A large main light like this, especially when it's placed so close to the subjects, will give us a very smooth looking main light quality. But this image wants to be a little more upbeat and exciting with its lighting. So, we won't be using a fill light that's big and smooth like we did in the classic portrait setup. Instead, we're going to choose a fill light that's got a little more impact and punch to it. This is where we're going to go to what I call my power fill. This lighting setup is ideal for a power fill, using its own strobe head, fitted with a 7-inch parabolic bowl reflector, then using 2 sheets of heat-resistant diffusion material, and a 30-degree grid spot to hold them in place. This will give us that punchy light that we're looking for and give us excellent fill light coverage. Take a look at this example of what the power fill looks like at a normal exposure level. You'll notice good coverage, some kind of sparky little specular highlights, and you'll also notice a slight shadow on the background. This is where, when we use the power fill technique, we either have to separate our subject from the background by a great distance, or we'll use a background light to go ahead and wipe out that shadow. Now, we don't plan to use the power fill up at our working aperture at a normal exposure. No, it's a fill light. We've decided in this instance that we want enough impact in this image that we're going to place our power fill's level at 2 stops less than our main light. Here's an example of what the power fill is going to contribute to our shot at 2 stops less than the main. There are 2 keys to using a power fill. First, always use the grid spot. It's going to help reduce the shadow that's cast on your background. And 2, always keep the power fill as close to your lens axis as possible. If you're not familiar with that term lens axis, it's really just an invisible line that goes from the center of your frame through the center of your lens, and it carries on through the center of your subject and the middle of the background. This usually defines the center of your photograph. We like to place our power fills right here next to the camera. Sometimes we'll move them in front of the camera when we're shooting an image with a long lens, but of course we're always careful to keep them out of our frame. Now when we're lighting men, we normally place our power fill on the same side as our main light. This helps to preserve some of the direction of our lighting. But when we photograph women, we just about always place the power fill on the side opposite of the main light. And being as our image today has a man and a woman, we decide we're going to place on the side opposite, just to be kind to the female subject. We're now ready to combine our main light and our fill light together. But keep in mind though that our main light is set to exactly f11.0 and our fill light is set exactly to f5.60. And when those two strobes fire, they're going to combine their light values at our subject's face and create an overexposure. And that's a problem that we need to fix. First thing we need to do, find out how far overexposed we are by taking a combined measurement of our main and our fill light. So pointing the dome into the lens, we take a test reading and discover that our meter tells us that we have an exposure value of f11 and 3/10. So let me show you how we fix that using our equipment here in the Crockett Studios. Come on with me. If you do a lot of precise lighting like we do, you may find that you'll benefit from investing into a digitally controlled pack and head flash system like Broncolor or ProPhoto or the Elechrome Micro AS system we're using here. They have many premium features, but for the shot that we're working on today, watch what they'll do for us. We've got our main light here in channel A and our fill light here in channel B. Now if we just want to adjust either the main or the fill, we can go to the selectors here on the channels and adjust them up or down in tenths of an f-stop all by themselves. Or we can go here to the overall section and we can adjust both the main and the fill, or whatever other channels are turned on, in tenths of an f-stop. So we're 3/10 overexposed. We've reduced the overall output of channel A and channel B by a combined value of 3/10 of an f-stop. Now we're going to create a soft rim light that we call a double kicker to help separate our subject from the background. We start by taking another strobe fitted with a 22 by 32 inch softbox and placing it on our main light's axis. You can find your main light's axis by drawing an invisible line from the center of your main light through the center of your subject, then place your kicker light's center right on that same line. You'll notice here that this kicker light is placed nice and high to cover the top and the sides of our subject, and it's tipped down by about 20 degrees or so to give us nice even coverage. Now make sure that you place your kicker lights at least 6 inches out of your frame to help reduce any lens flare potential, and make sure you don't put them too far back, because the further away your light source is from its subject, the higher its contrast will be. And we want a nice, smooth kicker light. Kicker lights get their name from the fact that their soft, broad light quality tends to kick the subject off the background. And kickers are very easy to meter too. We'll simply take our flash meter, put it behind the head of our subject in position 1, closest to this kicker light, and point the dome straight into the light source. Take a meter reading and set our power level based on what our meter tells us. Our working aperture is f11.0 for this shot. And because we want that nice soft kicker to be present but not overbearing, we've decided we're going to place that kicker value at 1 stop less than our working aperture. So that means we'll adjust the power of that kicker light until we get a meter reading of f80. Let's take a look at an example of what this one kicker light gives us. Now let's add a second kicker light to complete our double kick setup. Make sure that you use the same identical light modifier as your first kicker, elevate it to the same height, tip it down at the same angle, and meter it the same way you did your first kicker. This ensures the smooth, seamless look from one side to the other on this double kick setup. Let me show you an example image of what this kicker looks like all by itself and exposed at f80. Now let's fire both kickers at once and look at the great rim light we get. One issue you probably will have to contend with when using soft boxes for kicker lights is lens flare. 3 great ways to eliminate or at least drastically reduce lens flare potential is to first use a very good quality lens, and a long focal length lens at that keeps you at least 8 feet away from your subject. 2, use the best quality lens hood that you can find for your lens. If you think the manufacturer's lens hood doesn't do a good job, then use a third-party aftermarket lens hood. Roll it all the way out to its maximum and then bring it back so it's no longer clipping into your frame. That's going to give you the best protection of any sort of stray light entering your lens. And third, if you're still having troubles with lens flare, try using grids on your soft boxes. We use fabric grids here that Velcro in place, and these drastically reduce the side spray of our light and will eliminate any sort of lens flare problems. We'll put a finishing touch on this image by using a little bit of an unusual technique for our background. Let's start by using a gray muslin. We'll place a background light about 3 feet away from that muslin, right in the middle, with a 7-inch parabolic bow reflector. Then we'll adjust the power of that strobe so that right here in the center, it gives us an exposure value of f11.0. Take a look. Now let's refine our background light by adding a 40-degree grid spot to narrow the beam of light and give us this great result. Now let's add some impact to our background light by making it a vivid blue color by using a sheet of full CTB blue. That stands for Color Temperature Blue Gel. You can get these gels at pretty much any pro camera store. But remember, when you put a gel, just like when you use a filter, in front of your light, you're going to have to increase the power to get it back at f11.0. So we'll put on the gel, we'll kick up the power, and take a look at this great looking background light. So now with our main at just under f11 and our fill light at just under 5.6 combining to give us f11.0, we add in the double kickers at f8.0 and our background light whose center is f11.0, and we get a great looking and client pleasing image.